Hey there, Justin Hewlett. Thanks for joining me today. In today's video, I want to pick up right where I left off in the other video on RightCapital. And the other video was how to upload your information. This video is going to be how to navigate the site and what pieces of data are you looking at, what pieces of data are important to you, and then in future videos, I'm going to show you more in detail how you can change some of the information and how you can use this site for your own personal benefit in working and having a relationship with me as your advisor. So again, if you remember from the last video, we had Steve and Sarah Saver. And in the last video, they entered all their information into the profile. Now the profile is still up here, your net worth, your goals, your income, your saving, your expenses, and your family. You can still go in and change this information. So as an example, if you were to say, you know what, instead of putting 16%, I'm going to back it down to 15. You can change that information here. So anything to do with your profile, you can always go back in and change that information. Okay, so that's very important. That's how we continually are monitoring your situation and honestly working together to make sure that we're always on the same page financially. So let's look at where you would start when you log in, your dashboard. And the dashboard has a few components here. Your balance sheet, which shows your assets and liabilities, your liquidity, which shows how much money you have in a liquid position. And if you saw for Steve and Sarah, they had 15,000, and that would show what they actually have and what their target might be based on the months of living expenses they want to have. And this is a slider, and you can change this back and forth. So let's keep it there for today's purpose. Your budget, that's an important one. If you linked up your credit cards, your bank statements, anything that shows what's coming in and going out of the household, the budgeting tool would link up here to give you an idea of what you're spending and allow you to create a budget for yourself. The debt tab here underneath dashboard shows you, based on the information you put into the profile, when you'd have various balances of debt paid off. And so for this one is for Steve and Sarah, their mortgage payment. Now, if you remember on the profile here for their loan of $167,000, we put that the minimum payment based on their amortization was $840 per month. But Steve and Sarah decided to pay $1,000, so they're paying $160 extra per month to their mortgage. So if you go back to the dashboard here, this would show the effect of paying that $160 extra dollars. So now their mortgage will be paid off by the end of 2040. So basically taking roughly, 8 years off their loan. And you are actually able to go down here and show if you were to add extra payments to it. So instead of paying $1,000, you paid $2,000, or instead of paying $1,000, you paid $1,400. What that might look like. And again, for today's purpose, I'm just going to keep it at 0. But you can always monitor and look at this on a year-by-year and a month-by-month basis. What is the balance of your loan going to be? If you have any student loans, you'd be able to look at those here. And then here's what I think is one of the most overlooked portions of this software is the taskbar. This is where myself as the advisor, that I can talk to you outside of emails or outside of calling you. If we have a discussion that said, perhaps, Steve, I want you by a certain date to do something, this is where I would assign a task. So if I said, Steve, by the 15th of March, I want you to increase 401k to 20%. I would add this in here and save it, and therefore Steve would get reminder emails to do this task. So, which is very, very valuable. Again, it's a way for us to continually stay on track to your financial goals. The investment tab up here will give you an accounting of the current allocation of your investment accounts. So for the Steve and Sarah, their 401ks and their Roth IRAs, and the mix between equity investments and fixed income investments. And then we can go over here and say, what is the target we're trying to have their allocation look like? And if you're using the financial planning software with me called Riskalyze, there are various risk numbers that would be assigned according to whatever your risk tolerance was. So for Steve and Sarah, if they had a risk number of 65, it would show an allocation like this compared to what they currently have, and it would show the difference in annual return potentially in that different allocation. Now again, there's various allocations, sectors, concentration, tax allocation, holdings. For today's purposes, I don't want to get too far in depth with that, but this just surface level shows you how to navigate the allocation tab. The retirement tab here is the all-encompassing tab and probably the most important. And what I mean by that is based on what you put into your profile as your financial goals, this will give you a probability of reaching those financial goals based on what you're currently doing and based on any recommendations I would give you. So if you put, I'm going to scan down here to show you some of what they call action items. And there's a few things here, and this is where I think there's a lot of confusion. So I'm going to go in detail and explain these. One, the first part over here is your financial goals. So your retirement ages and your monthly expenses in retirement. Now, if we were to add any financial goals, perhaps I want to pay for a wedding in a few years. I want to buy a second home. That we could add those financial goals in here. For today's purpose, again, to keep it simple, the financial goals of retiring. Shows the income you have for Steve and Sarah, 58 and 72. What they're currently saving. Steve into his 401k, 16%, Sarah, 15%, and jointly held account, they're saving $2,400. And then what are their living expenses right now on a month-to-month basis? This doesn't count mortgage. This doesn't count any other debt payments. That's just what they're out of pocket every month besides their debt. And then you look over different strategies. Asset allocation, when do you take Social Security? How are you paying your debt? When you're in retirement, how are you taking distributions from your account? An education strategy, if you're going to pay for college or secondary school for your children. And then in retirement, how is your spending going to be allocated? And there are many more strategies or items we can add, which looks like this. You might have a goal of adding something else, like I mentioned before, a wedding, a car, purchasing something else, a business, giving gifts. You might say, in a few years, I'm going to start to take a pension from a previous employer. What does that look like? What if my expenses go up? I have an extra payment. What if I have a medical expense? You can add all these different items in here, which I think is very beneficial, because I feel a lot of times people see financial planning as a stop-start type event where you meet with your advisor, you get some recommendations, and then you come back after a time and you have to bring them up to speed on where you are financially and say, oh, here's where I'm at and this is what I'm trying to do. By having these extra items we can add on here and continually monitoring your progress, we're always able to stay on track toward your financial goals, because you and I both know where you stand financially and what you're trying to do. So that's very important. So looking back on here, you have your goals, your income, your saving, expenses, and strategies. The columns here will tell you what you're currently doing and then what we propose. So currently, Steve wants to retire at 64, Sarah at 63. Their expenses are $5,500. Here's their income, so on and so forth. Same thing with strategies. If we say, this is what we're currently thinking. We're taking Social Security at age 65, and we're going to continue to pay the current payments on our mortgage, which was that $1,000 a month. This is what we're currently doing, and it spits out this probability of success. Now, this is based on a Monte Carlo simulation, which essentially runs your scenario 1,000 different ways through 1,000 different market conditions and spits out a probability of success. Now, if we were to go in and change some of these, which you as a client have access to do this, you can sit back and say, what if I were to lower my 401k to 14, but maybe retire a year later? What might that look like? You'd hit the refresh button and be able to see the difference between what you're currently doing and what you're proposing. So that gives you the capability as a client to be integrated into your own financial analysis. And what I mean by that is you don't have to rely on me to know exactly where you stand all the time. You're able to say, what if I change some of these scenarios so that now I can have a discussion with Justin to say, okay, based on these new proposed ideas, what might you recommend, Justin? So I'm going to reset these back to their original percentages and dates for now. But this retirement scenario, this retirement tab, will give you an idea based on where you currently are and what you proposed. Now, the benefit of it, the current analysis, a current plan will show you updated every time we meet. So if I do an initial analysis for you, and then we meet in 6 months, and then another 6 months after that, every time we meet, this will be based on where you currently sit. Now, with keeping your information up to date, that is key. But the benefit of that is, based on this, I can always give you new proposals based on where you currently stand, as opposed to what I mentioned before, that stop-start. If you were to meet again after 6 months or 8 months or a year, a lot of advisors, and myself included, will sometimes give you proposals based on what you were doing a year ago. But with this software, we're able to constantly know where you stand. A couple of the different tabs in here which I really like. In the retirement section, you can run a stress test of your scenario to say, all right, Justin, I know I have an 80% probability of success, but what if some factors changed? What if the market drops? What if Social Security gets reduced? What happens if asset returns are lower? What if taxes go up? What happens if we live longer? What if healthcare costs go up? You can change some of these values in here and see the bottom line reflection and what it means to your financial situation. Again, the big one, if inflation goes up, that's one that people are talking about nowadays. If that goes up by 1%, your probability goes from roughly 80% down to 61%. So knowing these different stress tests, this gives you an idea and me an idea to say, oh, okay, what strategies should we do to help mitigate that? Social Security, this will kick out what your optimal strategy might be. Medicare, well, I'm not going to go in detail in today's video, and then your cash flow. So you're able to look at all different scenarios in your financial situation and see what that looks like. The insurance tab will give you an idea of what your insurance situation looks like from life insurance, disability, long-term care, and property and casualty perspective. Now, the point of this is to make sure that you're covered in the right areas and to make sure that you have adequate insurance in case something happens to you. And it's important to understand the effects of these on your entire financial situation. Again, not going to go in detail today, but that's part of the software program here. The education tab is, you can see it's blank because for today's purpose, I did not add an education goal for their 2 children. I'm going to have a whole video on funding education in the future. So today I'm just going to leave that one blank. The tax tab over here will show you your effective tax rate based on the information you put into your profile. And also something I think is very neat is it will lay out a tax return for you. Now this doesn't take over your tax return. This isn't your tax return. This will show you based on the information you put into your profile of your income, what you're saving into 401ks, what your assets look like if they're paying out capital gains. This will give you directionally what your tax return would look like. Again, this doesn't replace your tax return, and these numbers are not the end-all be-all. This just gives you a directional guide to what your tax return would look like. So when we're making decisions financially, increase your 401k perhaps, pay extra towards your mortgage, put money into an education account, as examples, we would know the direct ramifications directionally what those would mean for your tax return. And it was very interesting. We can actually look in future years based on the inputs we put in to see what your tax return would probably look like based on what we proposed or what your current plan is. So again, very, very valuable. The last tab here is the estate planning section. Now this one is often overlooked when people do a financial analysis, but it's important to understand the effect of your estate plan on your financial situation. So you're able to go in here and to see if you've created a will, a power of attorney, a living will, a healthcare proxy, have you checked your beneficiaries, and have you a living trust. Okay. Now you don't have to create all these, but you can check the box to say yes, I have, and you can actually send when was the document created. Now, the beneficiaries, you can actually go in and each one of your accounts link up a primary, or actually input a primary or a contingent beneficiary for each one of these accounts. Why that's important is, again, beneficiaries are oftentimes overlooked when people do their financial analysis. And if you don't have a beneficiary listed or you do not have the correct beneficiary, you can have dire consequences from a probate or estate tax situation. So you want to make sure these are always reviewed and kept up to date. And then it'll give you a flow chart of what that estate analysis looks like. If you were to pass money to your heirs, how much would they get, and so on and so forth, based on what you put into the beneficiary in your checklist here. So again, this is just how to navigate these tabs, what each one of these tabs does and what it means to you as a client. I hope you like this video. This just gives you a baseline approach on how to look at this. I'm going to have future videos on each one of these, maybe combine a couple at a time to give you more detail on how to navigate, how to change some of the inputs, and what it means to you. So again, I hope you liked the video. Please click like and subscribe for me. There'll be more videos in the future. If you have any questions, my contact information is below. If you're a current client and you look at this and you say, okay, Justin, I want to know more about how to navigate it, you can give me a call, shoot me an email, and we'll go through that. But if there's no other thoughts on this for myself, I hope you have a great day. Take care, and we hope to hear from you soon.